I decided, you know what? I'm going to grieve it and I'm going to give myself 20 minutes a day to feel sorry for myself. And then I'm going to take 23 hours and 40 minutes to basically take this on and take it on strong. So there was a shift because I know how to help others and turned it around toward myself to say, I can do this. I've got this. And decided to actually make it fun, which again, fun and cancer don't usually go into the same sentence. But for me, it was a choice.
Welcome to Power Up Recovery with Nutrition. It is time to make nutrition part of the conversation. I'm your host, Christina Veselak, and I'm so glad you're here. Did you know that it's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully? But to do that, it needs to be fed optimally. Have you ever wondered why so many committed people relapse or maybe even die? Why so many people on psychotropic medication still feel lousy and still have cravings? What if the missing piece is food, the right food? What if the right nutrients like amino acids or even eating protein every 4 hours could actually balance your brain chemistry and your mood without medication and support lasting recovery? In this podcast, we explore the powerful connection between feeding your brain well, mental health, relapse, and recovery from addiction. We will share insights from experts, inspiring recovery stories, and practical strategies you can use today. Whether you're in recovery, a healthcare professional, or someone passionate about emotional well being, this show is for you. Let's dive in and discover how fueling your body and brain with the right food, the right amino acids, and other key nutrients can fuel your transformation today. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Power Up Recovery with Nutrition, where we hear stories of radiant recovery from people who've used nutrition to feed their brains optimally, where we talk with top level researchers, and where we talk with clinicians in the field who use these approaches. So today I am delighted to talk with and introduce Dr. Cindy Howard. Um, who is a leader in wellness and author of the award winning Positively Altered Finding Happiness at the Bottom of a Chemo Bag. As a board certified chiropractic internist and nutritionist, she owns Innovative Health and Wellness Center and serves in a variety of leadership positions, including the boards of Inguardia Health and Fullscript, and as a respected voice and long-standing ACA Illinois delegate for nearly 20 years. Distinguished for her exceptional contribution to her field, Dr. Howard was honored as Illinois ACA Chiropractor of the Year in 2020 and received the prestigious Flynn Lynch Award 2015 for her outstanding dedication to healthcare advancement. Congratulations, my dear.
Thank you.
As
Thank you.
founder of the Positively Altered Project, Dr. Howard unites professionals to reimagine workplace and personal wellness. Through her book, podcast, and speaking engagements, she delivers science backed strategies for sustainable well being that integrate mental, physical, and emotional health. Known for her warmth and authenticity, Dr. Cindy inspires audiences with her quirky sense of humor, practical wisdom on resilience, and finding joy amid adversity. We'll get to contact later on. Anyway, welcome, Cindy.
Oh,
Glad
it's
to
a
have you.
pleasure. Thank you so much. This is going to be great.
Yeah. So, we had a topic that we've kind of chosen, but reading this sort of sparked my curiosity and finding happiness at the bottom of a chemo bag. Let's start there.
Okay. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Like it should be a bad comedy book, actually.
It doesn't actually, because I've heard so many stories of transformation from major challenges, especially cancer.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So I'll give you the background. It's interesting. So back in 2013, in about December, end of the year, there was a lymph node sticking out of the side of my neck. And I thought, this is weird. Usually when that happens, you're sick. And I waited a few days to get sick and I didn't get sick. So it led me down an entire cascade of blood tests and scans and, checking it out because I knew it wasn't normal. And eventually led me to a diagnosis of Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 2B. So it's really interesting as a practitioner to diagnose yourself. Usually you're sitting across the desk from another doctor and you can fall apart in front of them because, they're there to help guide you and pick you up. And I had to make a very quick decision. I was actually in my office in the middle of treating patients when I saw the fax come over with the biopsy results. Yeah, and room full of patients, and I thought, oh, all I wanted to do was break down and cry and pull the why me card. And I decided that that wasn't appropriate because I had patients who needed me and deserved my attention. And I took the piece of paper, I threw it on my desk, which is a great place to lose things, which is what I was hoping would happen to it, and marched into my next room only to find my patient crying because she just received a phone call from her mother that she was diagnosed with cancer. And it was in that moment that I realized my job, my responsibility was to lift her up, guide her, educate her, support her, and let her know that she and her mother could get through this. And what I realized after that was the perfect message for me. So although I shared it with my patient, I probably needed to hear it even more than she did in that moment. And it's interesting because I think our first tendency, based on neuroplasticity and the way the brain works, is to go negative, right? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? How come, right? And almost to feel sorry for ourselves. And based on advice in a book called Tuesdays by Morrie that I had read many years before, I decided, you know what? I'm going to grieve it and I'm going to give myself 20 minutes a day to feel sorry for myself. And then I'm going to take 23 hours and 40 minutes to basically take this on and take it on strong. So there was a shift because I know how to help others and turned it around toward myself to say, I can do this. I've got this. And decided to actually make it fun, which again, fun and cancer don't usually go into the same sentence. But for me, it was a choice.
Mhm. And I think it always is a choice.
Mhm.
And we forget that. I think self-pity, while absolutely normal, absolutely human, is very dangerous
Mhm.
as a way of life. We
Yeah,
we get
we
to
get
visit
stuck in
it,
that. Right. We get stuck in
right?
that, right? And then it perpetuates and it becomes it almost defines us. And for me, I wasn't going to let cancer define me. It was something I was experiencing, not something I had. And that word also became very important because having it was like ownership, and I didn't want to own it. I didn't want to deny
Mhm.
it, but I experienced it, I walked through it, and therefore finding the joy, finding the love in that experience
Right.
is really what turned it around to make it actually a really great 6 months out of my life.
That reminds me of what I hear from a lot of people in long-term recovery from addiction. You may have heard the term the grateful alcoholic,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So many people with long-term recovery report and express being grateful for their struggles with addiction because of what the recovery journey has brought them, right? And has brought us. I've certainly had a lot of trauma and struggles in my life, including cancer. And after and through, maybe not always smack in the middle of them, but always through and after, I find myself a more whole person, more healed, more peaceful, more joyful, more loving, more compassionate, more connected spiritually, right?
yes.
That it for me, it's been always has been transformative.
There's a unique choice that I think a lot of us make when we're faced with that, right? Addiction,
Yes.
disease, pick any adversity. But I think when we recognize that we do have a choice in how we move through it, the way we can self-reflect and look back at the things we need to learn and cherish and show gratitude for just becomes so much more obvious than before an event like that, where we just get up, we walk through our day, and we go to sleep. And I think we
That's
take a
right.
lot of those things for granted. And for those of us recovering from anything, it's the moment right now, right? It's the conversation just here now, you and I, that we can learn to appreciate instead of what's going to come a month from now to look forward to. It's the gratitude and the presence that I think a lot of us through that journey recognize and then live by.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that idea, the gratitude in the moment, and certainly not worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, but staying present in what is good in this moment. I know for me as well, and I think this is true for so many people, is these great big challenges. My cancer landed me in bed for 6 months.
Mm.
I would come out of bed, put a shirt on, teach my class, and go back to bed, right? For just about 6 months. And what I realized is that I there's a reason why I landed in bed, and I had to make sure that that reason got identified and eliminated in terms of the way I was living life.
Yes. And I had the same experience. I really truly believe that my diagnosis came at a time because I wasn't paying attention to the things I needed to focus on.
Right.
And I was running down a pretty dangerous path that wouldn't have been obvious to a lot of people, right? And I think that's where we get into trouble sometimes in this mental health space is I was working way too much. I wasn't balancing quality time with my kids. I was walking through a horrible divorce. My mother was walking through cancer. Um, there were lots of things I filled my life with in time and in space
Mhm.
versus in presence and in appreciation. So this was like the slap in the face that I actually am grateful for because it told me to
Right.
stop, right? And to look
That's right.
around and realize that some of the things that I were doing were actually very harmful, not only to myself, but the people around me.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. The wake up call, the how am I living life that needs to be changed? How am I relating to myself, to other people, to God, to work, right? I was always a workaholic.
Yes.
And that was when I decided that I was no longer going to be a workaholic, and I remember getting treatment and beginning to get better and looking at God saying, I don't know how to do this.
Hmm.
I don't know how to live life this new way.
Yeah.
I don't know how to not be a workaholic. So I guess you're going to have to show me.
Right. So workaholic is really, it's an interesting word for me because I would tell you I was one and still am one. But I love my work. So for me, this whole idea of work-life balance is kind of a funny phenomenon because I really enjoy my work and it is part of my life. But what I learned to do was stop saying yes to the things I didn't enjoy that didn't serve me in the workspace. So where I still love to work and I'm still very busy and I always joke I don't have a Monday because I do things on Saturdays and Sundays too when it's
Yeah.
appropriate. But now it feeds my soul rather than draining my energy. And I used to just be a yes girl to every opportunity and every project. And now
Hmm.
I'm a better, not a perfect, I'm a better no girl. And again, I pick the things where it's not painful to go through. I look forward to doing them. It's not that, oh, I got to go to work today kind of like I love going to
Right.
my office and doing what I
Right.
do.
Right.
So there's joy now in the workaholic definition for me where if I wasn't doing that, I also think I would be bored and unrewarded. So it's interesting how when we change the language a little bit and feed it, in my opinion, the right way, where there's mental positivity instead of the negativity bias that we sit in, then the balance just shows up.
Yeah. And for me, I don't know, it was so much doing stuff that I didn't fully enjoy doing because I really enjoyed and enjoy all my work. But there was an edge to my motivation that came out of woundedness.
Okay.
Okay. And and that's what was driving the not stopping when I needed to stop, the
Hmm.
not listening to my body, the not going to bed if I needed to go to bed, the not canceling my client if I really didn't feel well, because you're never supposed to cancel clients, right?
Right, right,
Especially not at the last minute. That's a no-no.
right,
And
right.
learning that, yeah, maybe it's a no-no, but you know what? I matter. I matter enough that if I actually need to cancel a client at the last minute, I do it.
Yeah,
And these were huge changes for me.
yeah, I think we forget a lot of times to nurture ourselves first instead of everybody else around us.
Yeah,
And we're better for everybody around us when we nurture ourselves first.
yeah, yeah. We certainly are. And I think the other interesting topic is just, the concept of, we were talking about workaholism, right? As overwork or lack of boundaries in work as an addictive process.
Hmm.
And that addictive processes do not always look like addictive processes.
Correct.
Now our society, we throw around the word addiction all the time. I'm addicted to this, I'm addicted to that. And in some ways it loses its meaning, except we know that it means, okay, this thing takes up an awful lot of space and intensity in my life. And there are specific, clinical definitions for addiction. But I like to think of it as an addictive process or an addictive relationship, and that may not have become entirely destructive. So, way, way back in the day, in my late 20s, very early 30s, I found that 3/4 of a beer made my lifetime deep, dark depression go away for a couple of hours.
Oh, wow.
I got to be happy for a couple of hours.
Hmm.
And then, of course, it came crashing back the next day. But hey, a couple of hours. So I started, but a whole beer put me to sleep because I'm actually allergic to alcohol. My
Oh,
liver doesn't like it
okay.
very much, right? So more than a glass of something just would knock me out, which was, I'm grateful for, and was highly protective because I have alcoholism through both sides of my family. And I developed an addictive relationship with 3/4 of a beer.
Mm.
Now, this is, people can laugh at this, and I laugh at it, but the reality is that I was organizing my life around 3/4 of a beer. I was making sure it was waiting for me.
Interesting.
I was not, it was it was an organizing principle in my life. And that's what full-blown addiction is where the substance or behavior becomes an organizing principle.
Hmm.
So even though it hadn't yet become a disorder, 3/4 of a beer every day wasn't doing damage, and it hadn't triggered the out of control, disorder of alcoholism. It was a problem, and it was being used to medicate a brain imbalance. And then when I discovered what was causing it in 1993, Joan Matthew Larson wrote her book 7 Weeks to Sobriety, and talks about a alcohol biotype where it's a genetic thing, and alcohol temporarily can relieve this genetic depression. Um, but a fatty acid found in either evening primrose oil or borage oil can actually fix it. So I gave up alcohol and I switched over to evening primrose oil. Right. And have not had, more than an occasional drink since then. Anyway, that was all to say that addictive relationships can take many different forms.
They can. And I think one of the things that I recognize is growing up, we always looked for the severity, right? It was the alcoholic family that you just right, had the problem. And one of the things that I learned actually through some really great therapists through some of my young challenging teen and young adult years, it was just that is that addiction isn't just the alcoholic that lives down the street. There are
Right.
lots of different aspects and degrees of it. And I even find in my own personal life, I joke, and it is a joke, but it's not a joke. You know, Shopping makes me happy, right? I have
Mhm.
a very large collection of cowboy boots. It's the joke that in order to, please Dr. Cindy, you buy her a pair of cowboy boots. And as much as that sounds funny, there are times that I recognize that when I'm in a point in my life where I don't feel fulfilled, I might pick up the phone and go to my favorite cowboy boot store and make a purchase, not because I really love the boots, but because I'm trying to fill a need that I wasn't able to fill internally myself, expecting the
Exactly.
boots to do that. And to your point with the three-quarters of a beer, does it for the moment, right? It's fun to buy a pair, it's fun to get them in the mail, and it's fun to wear them, but it really didn't provide any happiness internally that I was looking for. So
Exactly.
it's interesting, and I recognize it, right? And I've been stuck in that space for a very long time and haven't gone further. But it's really important, I think, to recognize those things because it could just be the beginning of the path that you take that leads you to the more severe, life-threatening or life-altering conditions that we can fall into when the cowboy boots aren't enough, and then you reach
That's
for the
right.
next best thing.
Well, exactly. And what I teach my students is that addiction actually goes through stages. We have early addiction, early stage addiction, middle stage addiction, and late stage. And they're actually characterized by the degree of depletion of our brain neurotransmitters,
Yes.
our mood mediating neurotransmitters.
Yes.
So early stage addiction comes when our neurotransmitters are depleted, one or more of them. We have symptoms, we seek relief, and then we find something that temporarily fires those neurotransmitters. We're not thinking about that that's what's going on. What we're experiencing is relief.
Yeah.
And we
It's
like relief,
we do.
right?
Yeah, it's really very interesting. A lot of the patients that I see in practice, and I think it's really unfortunate to a degree that the ones that walk through the door with a lot of symptoms that are already there, we can help. But there's so much that we need to look back on and change and reverse versus if we could just start at the beginning for a lot of people and understand that a lot of even these neurotransmitters are manufactured in the gut and how important gut is and the bidirectionality of the gut to the brain and the brain to the gut, that we live in this society where we breathe junk and we eat junk and we're stressed out and all of these things that can actually affect good gut health. And even just the assimilation of the amino acids that we intake and how we break them
Mhm.
down and utilize them could really start to lead us on this path before you start and buy your first pair of cowboy boots and realize it's a problem. So, it's interesting the degrees of where people walk in asking for help because even in those three stages, I think there's ways to look at this before you even enter stage one to make sure that
Well,
you are healthy.
but that's prevention.
It is.
Right.
It
That
is.
that's the whole field of prevention,
It
mental
is.
health prevention, addiction prevention, right? And this is where we need to be very much looking at what we're eating for two things. Two things. One, well, actually three things. One, of course, is gut health.
Hmm.
Are we protecting our microbiome? Are we nourishing our microbiome? Is it healthy? Are we protecting our digestive process?
Yes.
So we have to do that by our food choices, by our behavior choices. Secondly, it's ingestion. So actually, I have this little roadmap that I teach my clinicians. And step one is food. And within food, we have ingestion, digestion, absorption, and elimination,
Mhm.
right? And so all four have to be in place. Are we getting in the right nutrients? Are we
Mhm.
getting in the right nutrients that every brain needs to function optimally? And are we getting in the right nutrients that I, as a bio individual, needs to function optimally? And there's genetics, and there's ethnicity, and there's a stage of life, and all sorts of things that go into what my brain and body optimally needs at any particular moment in time. So there's ingestion. Am I getting the right nutrients? Am I digesting them properly? What's getting in the way of digestion? Am I eating, standing up from the refrigerator or in the car and my cortisol's running high and I'm not allowing my body to rest and digest, right? And we can go, on and on. Absorption has to do with the microbiome and the health of the gut wall. And elimination, means getting toxins out of our body. So all of this is part of mental health and therefore addiction prevention. But it's never ever talked about. So this is why I wrote, my book, Eat. I, yeah, there we go. Eat, a guide to radiant recovery. But it's also, could be said, a guide to prevention.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Because what happens then if we're not doing this, then we have symptoms. Then we have depleted neurotransmitters. Then we're seeking relief. And then when we find a mood altering substance or behavior that temporarily fires but then depletes those neurotransmitters, we want more. We want more. And then we want more. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But what were you going to say?
No, I was going to piggyback on a lot of your comments. One of the things that I think we screw up pretty easily now in the industry from gut health is this world of the microbiome. So, everybody on the planet has the best probiotic, and you can buy them, I think, even at the gas station these days, which by the way is not a good place to get them. But it's very, and don't buy any of that stuff at the gas station, but it's very interesting because we do a lot of stool function studies in
Except
the
for your apples.
Oh, you can get apples at the gas station? You sure? Are they
Sometimes you can
organic?
get apples at a
Okay.
gas station.
Okay.
I vote for that one.
Okay. As long as they're organic, maybe I can get
Yeah.
behind that. But we do a lot of testing of the microbiome because what I think people don't realize is not all probiotics are created equal, nor does it mean you need the particular strains that you're taking. So we've seen a lot of research now where we can dive into the particular strains and phyla of the microbiome and go, we're looking for evenness, we're looking for, how much diversity there is. And when there's too much of one and not enough of another, or imbalance of ratios of the different phyla, like Firmicutes to Bacteroidetes, we actually can drive the symptoms worse by taking the wrong probiotic that overstimulates the gut microbiome with the wrong bacteria. So, when
That's
I
why
first
some
started,
people get gas and bloating after they take a probiotic.
sure. Well, that happens when the probiotic doesn't make it down to the large intestine and it sits in the small intestine and then ferments with the sugar, causing a methane or hydrogen gas. We actually call that SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. But, this is where we fall into in this nutrition space sometimes this one size fits all routine where it's like, oh, I read about a probiotic. I'm going to go just order one on the internet or pick it up at my health food store. And it's really important to do the testing to see where the actual needs are. Because
Mhm.
even with those needs, we tend to retest and even switch up the probiotic because just because you needed it today doesn't mean you should be on that strain for the next 10 years either. And,
Right.
and we actually can be making people sick in this mental health space with that. The second part of, and there's a lot of things in gut function studies that we do, but the other thing that's really important is you can eat the best organic, largest amount of protein on the planet. And if you don't assimilate it and break it down, you can't utilize the amino acids and the nutrients
Right,
in
right.
protein. So we really need to look and see if
That's the
people can do it.
digest. Yeah, that's the my second step, right?
Yes.
Ingestion is the first, and digestion is
Yes.
the
Yes.
second.
But we need to test to look at it because we don't want to assume you can do it. We also don't want to
Right.
assume you can't. Because to that same point is if you start aiding in the digestion of it and you're replenishing, let's say, betaine and pepsin, hydrochloric acid, or even enzymes, it's the same principle of too much of a good thing is not a better thing. And if you
Okay.
don't have the deficiencies, now we're upsetting the apple cart at the gas station in the opposite direction. So
Well,
testing
and
for
you
me is a
also
big
have,
deal.
yeah, you also have to ask the underlying question as to why are you not making enough hydrochloric acid? Why are you not making enough, say, is your bile not being produced
Oh,
adequately, or your other, pancreatic enzymes? So, it becomes this detective story, which I kind of love. But what is your favorite testing when you say you really begin and end with testing? What is it? What are your favorite labs and from whom?
Yeah, no, that's great. So, hands down, the very first thing I love to look at in most people is what we call a gut function study. And the lab that I love is called Vibrant America. I do believe that they have one of the most thorough tests on the
Mm,
market in terms of how much they look at. We get 7 inflammatory markers, we get antibodies, we get short chain fatty acids, the entire
hmm
gut microbiome. They look at bacteria, yeast, fungus, viruses, and antibiotic resistance, immune system markers, bile acid markers. Anyway, it's very, very comprehensive. And from a few pieces of poop, we can get a lot of information and look at all of these different areas because we know that the gut not only does it operate as a neuro organ, but it also operates as an endocrine organ, immune system organ, right, on top of those other things. So I always love to start with the gut work. Now, secondary to that, and sometimes there's an inflammation marker in the gut called fecal eosinophil X that sometimes gets elevated. Not always with that, but certainly when that's elevated, we also start to think more about what we call a food sensitivity, which is very different from a food allergy. And a lot of people use
Right.
those words, intermixed. A sensitivity occurs when you
I
consume.
get lazy.
Yeah, totally, totally. When
Yeah.
you consume a food and that protein interferes with your white blood cell that causes an inflammatory reaction, that reaction can take up to 72 hours to affect you. So it's not always I ate something, I felt lousy, but it's I ate something and within 72 hours you can get inflammatory reactions. And some of those, even in the mental health space, could just be as simple as brain fog,
hmm
not being able to find your words, memory issues, and a
Yeah.
myriad of other symptoms as well outside of
But
that
Cindy,
space.
it can also be psychosis and OCD and
Yes.
depression
And
and
autism.
anxiety and
Yes. And
autism,
ADHD.
right?
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yes, yes,
every single psychiatric symptom in the book can be caused both by food sensitivities, this
yes,
delayed inflammatory response, but also by an IgE reaction. An
yes,
actual classic allergy can
yes.
cause every psychiatric symptom in the book as well.
Yeah.
And I had many of them.
Okay. So when you do testing, and to your point, the IgE is what's most commonly run and very important. IgG is probably second most commonly run, but there's also IgM and there's cell-mediated immunity, and then there's looking at it at the peptide level, which affects you in the small intestine. And
Right.
Vibrant America is also very good at that because they're the only lab that I'm aware of that tests at the peptide level for the small intestine, where the protein is actually broken down. So take dairy, for example. If we look at dairy as a whole protein, we put cow's milk in the body, we can test on an IgE, IgG, IgM reaction if it's a problem. But dairy gets broken down into casein and whey and then a bunch of other little polypeptides. So when that whole protein goes into your body and interacts with your lymphocyte, there may be no reaction, but it might be one of those polypeptides associated with the casein or the whey that triggers you once it gets broken down, and it's going to get broken down in the body. So
Right.
sometimes we
Right.
can
Yeah.
miss food sensitivities by not looking at that level. The third thing, because I don't want to forget, since you asked me, the third thing I always look at, and I've got a laundry list, but my top three things, the third one is actually a micronutrient test. And you mentioned this when you said you substituted your beer for evening primrose oil, right? The borage
Right.
oil. So we look at nutrients where we look at them in the serum, so in the bloodstream. We look at a lot of them in the white blood cell and a few of them like magnesium, which by the way plays a huge role in people with anxiety. We look at magnesium in the red blood cell and we can tell if it's a more acute deficiency or more chronic deficiency. All your vitamins, A, D, E, and K, your fat solubles, and C, all of your Bs. We look at a handful of minerals. I think it's copper, zinc, manganese, chromium, magnesium, calcium.
Beautiful.
We look at your amino acids, your essential and non-essential, as well as your branched chain amino acids. We look at some antioxidants, some cofactors that support liver and hormones, and then your omegas. So your arachidonic acid, your linoleic acid, which are omega 6s, which by the way drive inflammation, and then your omega 3s, your EPA, DHA, DPA, that protect you from inflammation. And we look at the
Well,
ratio. We look at the
and
ratio.
there's the GLA,
Yes, yes,
right? Which is why I take my board's oil every day because, it's an omega 6, but it's an
Yeah.
omega-6 that turns into an anti-inflammatory
Yes.
chemical,
Yeah.
PGE1.
So a lot of these people are running around because they pick up their fish oil at any old place and they're driving inflammation unknowing it because they're on it for so long without the protective GLA to actually help them. So it's really, really important that people get tested appropriately to see where the levels are because we can actually make you
Right.
worse by giving you natural supplements.
Well, you can, although it's hard to make you worse with fish oil, although it is possible. What test do you use for that?
So that is also a Vibrant America. They do all three of those tests for me, and it's called a micronutrient test. It's just a blood test, and most of the time it's as simple as looking at it and going, do you need it or don't you need it?
Yeah, nice. That sounds like a really, really good test. I was not aware of it before.
Yeah, there's a couple other labs that do micronutrient testing. They just happen to be my favorite. And they give us some other things I didn't mention, like selenium and iodine, which support the immune system. We look at choline, which is, choline is a precursor for acetylcholine, which
Right.
is the deficiency we get right when you walk into the room and can't remember why you walked in or where you left your keys or what the name is of the person that you just met. And I think a lot of times, especially as we age, right, we tend to blow those things off. We're like, well, I'm getting older. Of course, I can't remember things. Well, you are getting older, but things are changing that we can actually correct so that you can remember why you walked into the room until you're 100. So,
Right.
there's other micronutrients in there too that play a real role in our cognitive function that can
Now,
help,
does it include
correct.
looking for lithium?
That one does not. No, no.
Because lithium is crucial, I found, to look
Yes.
for. And so many of the people I've tested, especially people with addiction, are in the the very bottom of the bottom quarter of lithium levels.
Yeah, and
That's
I
why
don't
lithium
disagree.
orotate is so useful for
Yes.
some people.
Yes, and I don't disagree with you. We see that a lot for people who have a lot of anxiety. So when we need to balance that GABA neurotransmitter, the lithium
Mhm.
orotate becomes really essential for them.
Okay, so you test people for their micronutrients, for their gut health, and what was the third thing?
The food sensitivities.
Oh, and the food sensitivities. Very comprehensive. I love it.
Yes. Yeah. It's important. And then I'll tell you another place that I find a lot of challenges with that people don't always go down that path. There's also what's called a toxic burden test. And one of the correlations that we see is we look at heavy metals that patients can be exposed to. We look at environmental chemicals they can be exposed to and mycotoxins. And we find a lot of the mycotoxins are mold that are stored in a lot of these patients' tissues that are causing some of the cognitive issues as well.
Mhm.
And it's really important that we take a look at that because we're all exposed. I mean, it's almost impossible
Right.
to walk through this planet not breathing and ingesting some of these things. But the question is did your body have the right detoxification system to clear it?
Right.
Or is it storing in your tissues and your brain tissues that's actually causing some of these higher toxic levels that can lead you down these paths as well, including addiction? So another really good place to look, whether you think you've had exposure or not, but certainly if you know you've had exposure to certain
Mhm.
mycotoxins and chemicals, it's an essential piece to the puzzle.
And that's also offered by Vibrant America.
It is. Yeah, I'm kind of a groupie, and I have no
I
skin in
can
their
see
game.
that.
I don't own any stock. I don't, I get no kickbacks. I just, I spend a lot of time looking at different labs and always willing to change if I think I find something better on the market, but they've served me really, really well over the last decade. And again, there's other good companies out there. So for people listening, if you have one you love and is clinically
Mhm.
beneficial, please, you don't have to stray. But for me, that company has served me very, very well.
I will bear that in mind. Good, good. So, what else? What else would you like to share with our listeners?
Part of my journey outside of my clinical practice and the things that we've already talked about really has to do with just general mindset. And I talk about this shift protocol, if you will, and that is really looking at the language we choose to use when we're talking to people, when we're talking to ourselves, self-messaging, and when we're
Mhm.
faced with any adversity, right? So whether it's addiction or anything else that you are walking through, the brain believes what you tell it. So it's really important that we choose our words very carefully, that we say out loud, that we write down, that we share with people, because the brain is going to believe it. And I would love to just encourage people to take a deep breath before they speak and think about the consequences and the repercussions of the negative words that we tend to lean toward and try to replace them with
Mm,
positive words, right? So, for example, I try and I catch myself all the time. I'll be like, oh my God, that's a problem. Nope, it's not a problem. It's a challenge. I love a challenge. I don't love a problem.
mhm.
And it might be the same thing that's coming my way, but when I look at it as a challenge, and you can see even just the way I sat up talking to you, I get excited about it. When I say, oh my gosh, what a problem, I slump back in my chair and I feel a little low. So
Yeah.
picking the right words as you are walking through whatever your challenges are out there, um, make a big difference, and they're really important. So practice positive words.
Thank you for that. That's very good to bear in mind. So, if people want to connect with you further or work with you, how would they find you?
Oh, I appreciate that. So my email for the speaking is hello@drcindyspeaks.com, and Cindy is Cindy. So it's DRCINDY speaks.com. If you want to reach my clinical practice, my office, that website is innovativehwc.com. So you can check out the website and you can contact us through there or shoot me an email on the speaking. My speaking website is just drcindyspeaks.com, and there you can join my newsletter and become part of the community. Follow
Nice.
me on, I don't know, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm probably all over the place under Dr. Cindy Speaks. And then please check out the podcast called the Positively Altered Podcast, where we talk about all things health, physical, spiritual, emotional, personal,
Lovely, lovely.
corporate.
My three-legged stool,
Yes,
biochemical or bionutritional, psychosocial, and spiritual. We
yes,
all have to be addressing all three at the same time.
yes, I agree. Absolutely.
Well, wonderful, Cindy. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please push the like button and the subscribe button and share it with friends and neighbors and colleagues and clients. And if you wish to learn more about this approach to mental health and addiction recovery, please check out my website, which is aminoacidtherapy.com, for more training. See you next time. Thank you for tuning in to Power Up Recovery with Nutrition. I'm Christina Veselak, your host, and I hope today's episode has inspired and equipped you with new insights and tools to support your recovery journey or practice. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who could benefit from the knowledge shared here. Stay connected with us for more episodes filled with practical advice, expert wisdom, and inspiring recovery stories. Remember, nutrition is a powerful tool in mental health and relapse prevention. Power up your recovery today. I'm Christina Veselak, and I'll see you next time.